Okay, cool. So my name's Dan Warren. I'm the BIM manager for McMillan, Pazdan Smith. I have a lot to get through because I'm really excited about this workflow. What we're going to talk about is going basically from InfraWorks into FormIt, and sort of how do you generate a site in InfraWorks, what you can do in InfraWorks, and then how do you prep that to bring it into FormIt and use it in FormIt. So this is very much for like preliminary design. Our last two tools are very much, I think, geared towards design documentation or construction documentation, and this is very much more free form, which is what I really like about it. So let's get into it. So this is not the whole workflow we're going to cover today. This is the map that I use to explain kind of how it all works. So where's my pointer? So starting up here, InfraWorks pulls in information from lots of different sources. And it compiles it. And you would really use InfraWorks for doing like site development, buildings, topographies, things like that. It does have tie-ins for Civil 3D and GIS workflows. I am not going to cover those today, but what we're going to focus on is really the connection between InfraWorks and FormIt. And then, of course, once you go to FormIt, that's where like all the fun happens. I don't know if is the Zoom window blocking the right side of my screen?
Nope.
Okay, good. So yeah, and this is where in FormIt and Revit, we can go back and forth like those bespoke design elements. And then of course, you can always sprinkle a little dynamo magic in there to make it happen. And we've got access to the design performance tools like Insight. So what we're really going to focus on is just this piece right here. And I'm going to show you like, it's really, really simple to get going because InfraWorks is just a sandbox. So you use a tool called the Model Builder. And I'm going to go to Durham, North Carolina, because it's a cool little city if you've never been there. You can only bring in about a 200 square kilometer site, which is about 75 square miles in freedom units. And once I pick my site, I can use the satellite to kind of drill in and get a good idea on like where I'm going to be looking. I could pull in the whole image or just like select an area. I actually prefer to use a polygon. So I'm just going to draw in a little polygon here. Let me get rid of my pointer. And, and this is the site I'm going to end up pulling in. And that's the hardest part of this whole process. So draw your little area. Okay, so this is where you name your project. So I'm going to name it Durham, North Carolina, and this is just a demo. So then we're going to set the coordinate system. And if you're not familiar with the coordinate systems, it's really not that big a deal for this workflow. But I know that this is the North Carolina NAD 83F, which is just US 83 foot. And that's it. I press the create button and it's done. You can also just use the default LL 80, I think it's 87 or 83 out of the box, or sorry, 84. And it will work. So now all I have to do is wait for an email that says, hey, your site's ready. And it's really, really fast. So you say, thanks, Autodesk, let's go look at the site. And then we go into InfraWorks, and this is where we can explore it. So you can choose to work locally or on Autodesk Docs. Working on Docs opens up a lot of workflows that involve other products like Revit. I'm just going to do locally for now. And this is not cropped, like this is all like live timed. So it's pulling in all the GIS data from OpenStreetMap, OpenGIS, compiling the topo and doing all of that while I'm sitting here stalling, waiting for it to finish. Once it finishes opening up, you'll get a flash of my email, and then we'll jump into InfraWorks and here's your site. With all of the procedurally generated buildings and your topography. And the topography is at elevation and does reflect the actual topography of the site, which we'll see when we go into FormIt. So now the next step is to start kind of cleaning things up, because the fact of the matter is, whether you're using FormIt and the Dynamo plugin or InfraWorks or even like Cove tool, like procedurally generating buildings from satellite imagery always has errors in it. So like you have to go in and clean up the buildings at least a little bit. It's really easy to just kind of drop the vertices out and then I can square up my buildings and clean them up. And the buildings are like, they're like Lego blocks. You can kind of squish them and push them around and make them bigger or smaller. So it's really super easy to use. And just so you know, like I record this on my laptop, which has really low graphic settings, but like you can crank the graphic settings up and it starts to look like a video game. And yeah, so you go in and you kind of start cleaning up your buildings. You've got other options as well. Like each of the buildings has a style associated with it. So if I wanted to, I can just grab the building and change its skin style on the fly. You can actually define skin styles as well if you want to. But this allows you to give sort of a context. We have done projects where we've taken photographs of the front of buildings and made skins for buildings that look like the actual building. Now, remember, we're not trying to create a realistic recreation of the site. We're trying to create something for architectural visualization to understand context, right? That's really what we're going for. It has other applications, but that's what we use it for. You can also do fly-throughs. So like this is going down Raleigh Road, and I don't have JavaScript installed, but if you did, you can do traffic simulations and you can do pedestrian simulations and things like that. It actually is pretty awesome. And then my favorite part are the happy little trees. You've got lots of site tools. So if I wanted to create a stand of trees for like just background context in my building, I place out my space and then InfraWorks will generate the trees for me. And I mean, this is very much like Twinmotion or Lumion, where I can adjust the density. And you can actually mix these trees up, change their sizes. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. Like if I go in, I can independently control the trees as well as I could control the whole mass as well, swap out the different tree types. You know, trees are friends. Like you can't go wrong with trees. And InfraWorks comes with a great collection of site design tools, but you can also create your own. Now, I want you to see the detail that InfraWorks actually generates. Every single tree has every single leaf on it actually generated through a skin, and it provides a very compelling visualization. It is also like really, really hard on FormIt and Revit if you're not careful when you're trying to make that bridge, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. Then you also can lay out your site grading areas. So like if you're planning a building layout, you would create different proposals, which are like design options. And then I'm going to come into here, I'm going to lay a concrete pad out. And this is really nothing more than like a building pad. So I drop this down on the floor or on the site, and it'll actually grade the site for me automatically. And it'll adjust the grading. And now I can look at it from the side and see what's my relationship to the road, that kind of stuff. And if I want to adjust that elevation, I can, and it will adjust the road. It will adjust the contours and everything. Now, if you actually know anything about civil, you can actually do stormwater analysis, do all your sewer and utility lines and everything. And it's pretty awesome. So then finally, we want to get this out of InfraWorks. You can use InfraWorks for a lot of things, but we want to bring this into FormIt so we can then start playing around with it. So you pick what you want to export, or you can use a pre-saved one. I found that always using a polygon helps a lot. If you choose entire model, it takes a long time sometimes for InfraWorks to process this. So I always recommend drawing a line or drawing your polygon around what you actually want to bring into FormIt. So there's your outline. If you needed a shapefile, you could actually use a specific shapefile. Your coordinate system, which doesn't matter in this specific workflows, but if you are coordinating or tying into Civil 3D, it certainly does matter. And then we're going to choose, do we want this whole thing to come out as like one big FBX, or do we want to break it up? And since we're going into FormIt, we want to break it up. So you can see we got the ground, the buildings, and the trees as separate FBX files. More on trees in a second. What's really important here, since we're going into FormIt, is to toggle off merge objects with the same texture, because it's how InfraWorks and FormIt manage objects. This will actually make objects of the same texture in InfraWorks one object in FormIt. And it took me a long time to figure that out before I realized like I'd go to move like one building and like half the east walls of all my buildings would move. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. It's like, it's because InfraWorks manages textures, differently than the way like FormIt manages objects. So it's really important when you're going cross product to understand those kind of nuances. So we're now out of InfraWorks. We go into FormIt. By the way, one of my favorite tools. As far as location goes with FormIt, it's really easy. It's completely independent from InfraWorks. So I just type in my city, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to a weather station that's near our site. So I type in the city, zoom out, and I can see there's a weather station that's 6 miles to the west. And this is the one I'm going to use. And this is going to be used for sun studies. It's going to be used for thermal and energy analysis. It's basically like where all the weather data comes from. So that sets my location. Now, the next thing I want to do is then start bringing in those InfraWorks exports. And there's different ones for each of the layers I exported. I forgot to do my building pad. Otherwise, I would have a building pad as well. And because I didn't export the building pad, I don't have an adjusted topo that will come up. But here is my topo. It's actually like, you can see it's at the correct elevation. It's not a flat block like what the Dynamo plugin does for FormIt. And then the next thing is bringing in my buildings. And I go ahead and just import the buildings, and bingo, bango, I should have buildings that appear. There's my buildings. What I like about this is everything's using the same origin. So like alignment is super easy. You just have to remember to hit escape after you bring it in. Otherwise, you'll place it in the wrong spot. And then finally, a note on trees. Remember, I said that cross-product workflows are really important to understand, and this is where modeling matters. Well, all those individual little triangles that InfraWorks uses come into FormIt as individual elements. So if you want to bring trees into FormIt, I would recommend bringing in only a few, or you have like a water-cooled supercomputer that can handle like this much graphical analysis, because FormIt has to handle every single one of those triangles when you rotate, zoom. It gets pretty wild. So just note on that.
Create a simplified tree.
Yes. Okay. So you can bring in FormIt and InfraWorks are like they're sandboxes. So you can bring in just about as many file types as Navisworks can handle. So it's very fluid. So we have people bring in SketchUp stuff. It's wild. I love working in FormIt. But yeah, just be aware. Okay, so now that we have a site, we have trees. I mean, we have our buildings and everything. One of the things, remember, cross-product we have to remember is that these elements are generated differently in InfraWorks than they are in FormIt. So in FormIt, you could see like it's all surfaces, because that's how InfraWorks handles it. But if I wanted to manipulate this element in FormIt, it's actually quite easy. I just have to select all the building sides and make it a group. And then I use Control X to cut it out of the group, and just Control X, exit the group, and then Control Shift V, and it places it right back in its original location. So now I have an individual building I can now manipulate and work with. Then make sure you add it to the right layer. Of course, layers are really important, just like work sets are, to anybody in my firm that's listening. And then the last part before we do anything like do any actual work is to organize your model, because all this stuff comes in like on the same layer. So we'll want to put the ground on the ground layer and the buildings on the building layer. And it's just a matter of picking the object and then like assigning it to the layer. This makes life a lot easier, especially if you're going in and out of Revit with FormIt, because you can see I could turn off on and off the visibility and the lock, and then I could turn off the export to Revit. So if I'm going back and forth between FormIt and Revit, that's how I can kind of organize and control the chaos that's going back and forth. And then I just put the rest of my buildings on the building layer. We'll skip to the next video. So here's my my architectural masterpiece. You can see why I'm a BIM manager, not an architect. And this is where the fun happens, right? You could start sandboxing and shaping your building. You could start like kind of laying it out, seeing how it works, playing with it on the site. And then I could take it, and this is where I can start doing my solar analysis and my energy analysis work. So if I wanted to see how this, this architectural design works, I can now start generating solar analysis. Then you got all the solar tools that are associated with FormIt. And if I want, I could do the whole building for either like a specific time of year or a cumulative year. And since this is in the southeast United States, like it's basically going to be a giant red cube unless you have some sort of like 50-foot obelisk next to your building. That being said, the procedurally generated buildings from InfraWorks are actually fairly accurate to their true elevation because it's pulling open GIS data. So like if you're working in a dense like urban area, like a lot of your buildings are approximately the correct size. So then you'll actually get that shading impact because you're using the same location information in InfraWorks and at FormIt. And then if you want, you can go up into Insight and things like that. Now we're gonna, do the prep for export to Revit, and this is basically where if my, beautiful artistic building is going to go out to Revit, I'm going to add it to its own layer so I can control that. And then this is the start of the continuation of that giant constellation of products I showed at the beginning. We're getting ready to go into Revit, and then we have that back and forth between Revit and FormIt, which in 2023 is phenomenal. Like if you haven't checked it out in a long time, like I would really go back and look at it. They have like, I predict that one day FormIt will be the in-place modeler in Revit, but I'm kind of just speculating there. So the final bit here is we're in FormIt, like we're doing our 3D sandbox, we're shaping out our building. So like this would be where we can go from this point. We have our sort of area and our site sort of laid out. And there's a lot we can do here, but then we can also go back and forth between Revit, or we can kind of go back and forth into Insight. And the great thing here is going from FormIt to Insight, you can kind of feed this back and forth between the two programs in Insight. So very early in design, you can kind of understand how your site is impacting your design and impacting your performance. So yeah, so there's a lot more here than we covered, but like I love InfraWorks, and you're happy to download. I'm happy to let you download this PowerPoint if you want, or you can just reach out to me. I'm pretty accessible on LinkedIn or Twitter. But yeah, so that's my workflow. Hope you guys liked it.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. That was really, really cool to see FormIt. And Heather, I agree. Looks like FormIt has improved quite a bit.